All right. And sitting down with us this afternoon, we've got former TSN host and host of the Sens Nation podcast and the Steve Warne Project, Steve Warne. Steve, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm very good, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, anytime. So lots to unpack from this past weekend here. Obviously, the NHL rolled out their big Lake Tahoe outdoor experience. And to say that it was the smoothest rollout would be an overstatement right there. But I mean, as a fan, what did you like about the viewing experience? And what were the things that you didn't like about what you saw this past weekend?
Well, I think the outdoor concept, I always get a kick out of it. We all have that grassroots, grew up on the outdoor rink thing. It really, takes you back to square one as a hockey fan. If you love playing this game, there's a real charm to that, seeing the NHL guys kind of going through their childhood. The vistas, the views, Lake Tahoe is an absolutely gorgeous setting. And we're never really going to get an opportunity to see that again, given that you're always going to want fans ideally at games. It doesn't matter right now because you can't have fans.
Mhm.
So it was a neat opportunity. I'd love to see Parliament Hill or the Rideau Canal for the Sens' sake. That would be a cool thing in these circumstances. But I certainly like the views and I like the grassroots feel to the whole thing. The things I didn't like, as with most people, I'm sure, the ice conditions were really, really poor. They were unsafe. There were a couple of moments where on that Saturday, that first period with Vegas taking on Colorado, like I thought a couple of guys were going to go in head first into the boards, catching those ruts in the ice. It was just brutal. And it wasn't just a safety issue; it was an entertainment issue as well because the hockey was garbage.
Mhm.
Because for two perspectives, the puck wasn't sliding right. And you could tell as well that the guys were so worried about shearing off too much ice if they get going too fast, stopping on a dime, that they could go right down to the base
Yeah.
and blow out a knee or whatever. And so it was unsafe. It was unentertaining. It got better. I briefly looked at it when it was midnight our time, I guess it was, by the time they played the second and third period. So it was a little better there, but I certainly didn't like that part of it either.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a little bit alarming that they've been doing it since 2003, and no one thought that, okay, it's right on the border of California and Nevada here. So it's not like we're up in the Rocky Mountains where it's minus 20, but no one thought that a 1 p.m. Mountain Time puck drop at the hottest part of the day, like how did this not cross the NHL's mind here?
Yeah, it's not a first go around. They've been doing this for the better part of 20 years now. And I'm sure that anytime they're outside, the glare of the sun has always been an issue. I don't know. Was it a new staff? For sure. And I don't know what the answer is, but I guess it's when you schedule the game is the key.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have it, earlier in the day or later in the day. But when the sun is at its brightest, it doesn't matter if it's, minus 10, minus 12 degrees, if it's cold enough. If the sun is glaring, the ice is going to be garbage. We know that. And yeah, I was a little surprised that they seemed as surprised by it all as they were.
Yeah. So this is the latest iteration of a couple different versions of the outdoor games here. You've got the Heritage Classic, the Winter Classic, the Stadium Series. And obviously the twist this year was the vistas, the views, the sort of show around the show. Now, this year it was because of the fact that, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We can't have, a baseball stadium worth of people packing the stands here. But do you see this as a sort of one time only, it's a circumstance of the times type situation? Or do you think this will maybe be a fourth sort of offshoot of that outdoor game series? And we can see some more games geared towards venue more so than actually having fans around the game itself.
I think it would be a fantastic concept to go based on venue, and depending on the venue, whether it's on a golf course or whatever, if you can find that sponsorship, there's someone that basically offsets the loss of the gate you'd receive from having fans in a football stadium or something like that. I absolutely think it's a great idea. I'd love to see like the two locales that I talked about in Ottawa, and you could just imagine these geographical beautiful things you could do in the backdrop. I absolutely think that'd be a fantastic thing. But obviously, the owners first and foremost, they're thinking dough. And so, if you can't offset the lack of the gate, then it's not going to happen. It's got to fit both worlds. And I think there are some fits that do exist out there. It's just a matter of teams and the NHL. They're going to have to get creative with this kind of thing and find those advertisers that will write that off. And yeah, I think that's a fabulous way to go because let's be honest, playing in football stadiums, it's kind of been a been there, done that thing. And I think the average hockey fan, it's not destination viewing for them like it once was.
Yeah, yeah. And, given the fact that, as some people know, some people might not know, but, Gary Bettman is actually a former basketball guy himself. He used to be with the NBA. And a lot of what they're doing with the NBA is really trying to grow it bigger than just a North American sport. They're trying to turn the league into a global brand. Do you see maybe this being a prime opportunity to take this sort of offshoot and pick some really spectacular locales around the world to try and grow the game internationally? And if so, like what would be some dream destinations where you would love to have an outdoor game if you could pick anywhere in the world?
Oh, I mean, wherever you want to go. I mean, I don't know. You could put it in front of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, you could go anywhere. And they've obviously tried with these global series. We all
Mhm.
remember the Sens disastrous run over to Sweden, where their season, the fate of their franchise really turned on a dime. They fell apart after that trip for some reason. But yeah, I mean that the NHL is looking globally all the time. So why not put a new wrinkle into that? And instead of just playing in, Swedish Pro Arena X,
Mhm.
um, go somewhere that's, where basically you're transporting the viewer. The hockey fan not only gets to see their team in a new locale, but they get to see some wonderful spot in the world that is now the backdrop for their favorite hockey team. To me, it's a no brainer. You're always looking to expand the NHL. Probably not in our lifetime, but I believe one day the NHL will have actual franchises over in Europe.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, fairly quiet day in the NHL yesterday. There was only 4 games on the actual schedule. 2 of them in the Canadian division. Both went to overtime. So you had the Jets beating Vancouver 4-3 in OT. And then obviously the Senators downing the Habs 3-2 on the strength of Brady Tkachuk's overtime heroics there. Are we finally at a point where even Habs fans need to now admit what pretty well every other fan base knows, that Brady Tkachuk is the superior player to Kotkaniemi at this point?
Well, we knew that woman at the draft on draft day. I don't know who exactly that was, but this I don't know if you remember that picture. This It was a woman. She seemed like she was about 50, and when they announced Kotkaniemi's name, she was like this. It was the best expression ever. And every time I think about the comparison, and we saw it again last night, I don't think there's any question that Kachuk is now and will continue to be a superior player. It just, I think we can put that debate to rest. I like to leave a five-year window, whether we're talking about who won a trade or who made a good draft decision. I like to leave at least 5 years. I think I'm ready to make the call right now. Brady Kachuk continues to get better game by game, and so does Kotkaniemi. And the die is not fully cast on either of those players. They're still developing, but I feel like it's an impossibility that Brady Kachuk ends up at the end of the day a lesser player than Kotkaniemi.
No. One aspect of this season that I cannot still wrap my head around is how the Sens can continually be so frisky against Montreal and Toronto, who are seemingly the class of the division right now, and yet just fall flat on their face against everyone else there. How do you try and explain this ability to get themselves ramped up for these two opponents, yet whenever Vancouver or Winnipeg or anyone else rolls into town, it's a 5-1 shellacking?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, maybe it's a bit of the column A and column B that the Sens get really ramped up for two of their arch rivals, and those two arch rivals see where the Sens are in the standings, and they're just the opposite. They're not ramped up at all. They're in fact coming into the game going, okay, maybe looking past them. I don't have any answers for you. But there's no question the Sens have. When you watch the games that they've won, the two against Toronto or the two against Montreal and two against Toronto now, I guess, right?
Mhm.
So you watch those games and you say, how in the world can they be as bad as they are? I don't really have any answers for you, except that maybe mentally speaking, one side's getting all worked up because it's their arch rival, and the other two are looking past a team that's the worst team in the NHL and has been for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in a game where Thomas Shabbat yesterday was inactive because of injury, you've got Zub, you've got Brandstrom. They're just buried on the depth chart, almost inexplicably here. At the beginning of the season, you got DJ Smith and Dorian sort of selling it on, well, we don't want to rush them too soon, too much, too fast. We want to rely on our veterans. we're now at game 20, and in the truncated season that we're in, we're almost halfway into the season. Yet yesterday, you've still got them playing the likes of, the Rileys of the world there in power play situations and big minutes compared to some of the newer faces there. How do you try and justify some of these usage rates that we're seeing out of the veterans when they've been selling this rebuild to us for how many years now, and they don't seem to be fully trusting of the kids out there?
Yeah, and you wonder what's their worry, what's the fear? Like, what are
Mhm.
they going off here? Because I understand if you were a coach of a team that would maybe be flirting with a playoff spot, that you'd be afraid, okay, if I put the kids in there, they're going to make mistakes and we might lose hockey games. Really? At this stage, you're worried about losing hockey games? Like, you're the worst team in the league. So where's the fear based in? Um, give the kids an opportunity. Let them learn on the job, get their experience, baptism by fire, because the veterans aren't leading you to anything special.
Mhm.
In fact, I would argue that they're lesser hockey players in some cases. Mike Riley had the most minutes of anybody on the ice last night.
Yeah.
How does that how do you reconcile that in your head as the coach of that team right now? I'm not trying to bury DJ Smith, but I look at Mike Riley and he has moments where you say, "Oh yeah, there's something there. He can skate with the puck. He has flashy moments, but man, does he give up the puck a lot. Man, does he fall on the ice a lot, loses man a lot." And so it boggles my mind that they're that fond of that particular player. The kids have got to get their opportunities here, and there's really no reason to be shy with them anymore. I don't think that these guys got to where they are. So many of them really high draft picks. They didn't get to where they are because they're going to wilt on you,
Mhm.
because that's also a concern. Oh my God, if they lose a few games in a row and they struggle, they're going to wilt. They'll be just terrible hockey players. It'll destroy their development. Yeah, I'd love them to be insulated by 5 Hall of Famers. That would be fabulous, but that's not an option. I don't think any of them. Do we think Tim Stützle is going to fall apart if he goes out and they lose 3 in a row, but he's leading the team in ice time up front? I don't think so. Look at the response he had in Edmonton when Canada absolutely destroyed Germany. He came back and played fabulous for the rest of the tournament. You're not going to lose these kids. You're not going to destroy the development if they go out and they have some tough times. I think just the opposite. They'll scuffle, they'll make their mistakes, and then suddenly, someday, a month and a half, 2 months from now, you'll start going, wow, they're really starting to shine. So, in answer to your question, I think every Sens fan is frustrated with that right now. Why did you bring in these vets, and why do you continue with them?
Yeah. Now, do you think that's a coaching decision on DJ's part, or do you think that there is maybe a message coming down from higher saying that whether it's to try and boost their trade value leading up to the trade deadline, or whatever the case might be, to try and keep some prospects before their contracts kick in? Where do you think that direction's coming from at this point?
Well, I think there's that old expression, right? That too many cooks spoil the broth. And I really feel like ownership is wildly involved, management is wildly involved. And of course, DJ Smith, as kind of the third man on the totem pole, he gets to control what he controls. Eugene Melnick is an involved owner. We all know that. He's a frugal owner, so he's going to demand that frugal decisions are made. He's also a hockey fan at his heart of hearts, so he's going to demand what he thinks is the right hockey thing to do. He's going to demand that as well as he sees fit, and he's not going to be shy about that. And then the middleman, Pierre Dorion, well, he doesn't necessarily want to pull these veterans out because he just so recently acquired them. It doesn't look very good optics wise if all these guys he brought in all of a sudden are going on to the waiver wire, which is why they lost Rudolph Spalsers, in my
Mhm.
opinion, because he was basically placed on waivers 2 days before the season started. And I think we can all agree Rudolph Spalsers, now it's very clear that that was an error in evaluation. They should have kept that guy and then put somebody else that you knew was going to clear waivers easily. But at the time, well, how's that look as a GM if I'm already putting a guy like Coburn or a guy like Galchenyuk on waivers before he's played a freaking game for the Ottawa Senators? That does not look good on the GM. So
Mhm.
obviously he's got a say in who's playing and who's not to some degree. And of course, DJ Smith, like any head coach, he's got a say in it as well. So my feeling right now is that there's a lot of hands in the batter, and right now they've got to kind of get focused. They've got to try and get past all that. And right now well, there's a lot of disjointed things happening, but you're seeing signs of improvement all the same, even though all that's going on.
Yeah. You touched on the fact that already, we're bottom of the league there for the Senators, likely headed for a top 3 draft pick this season as well too. In a unique year where there is no consensus number 1 overall prospect there, where do you see the franchise sort of going? Do you see them picking with that top 3 pick if they end up getting it and selecting another player? Or do you actually see them trying to use that pick and package it with some prospects to go out there and finally get, whether it's, that bona fide number 1 center or a real asset to help the organization next year? Do you think they're actually calling a name come draft time this offseason?
No, I haven't really thought about it till you asked the question. And it's funny to be 20 games into a regular season and we're already doing a pseudo draft preview here already. But such is the state of the Ottawa Senators that we're
Yeah.
already looking into that. But my feeling, my gut right now tells me, you've got so many guys that are in North Dakota that look really good. And you have so many guys that are in Belleville right now that look decent. It was funny. I was looking at Belleville's roster and North Dakota's roster, and I'm like, if I had to pick one of those draft pipelines or prospect pipelines, I'm not sure I wouldn't look at North Dakota right now. Belleville, I just looked at the roster the other day because they've only played 4 games, and I said, okay, let's see all these prospects they've gotten. I'm like, well, it's not as deep as I challenge any of your viewers and listeners to look. I think you'll find that it's not as deep as we think necessarily. There's not a lot of 100% slam dunk guys down there, whereas in North Dakota, I'm kind of pumped about it. So in answer to your question, I think we got a case of there's still, there's 8 or 9 guys who are on their way. They're on the development path. I think you're now at a stage where the timing of everything, you'd almost rather than have that top 3 overall pick and have yet another guy who's for the future, get a guy that was drafted 3-4 years ago and is maybe now ready for prime time, and some team that's scuffling along and that is just starting their rebuild. Maybe make a deal with them. That's how I feel about it. What do you think? Would you go? Would you take the pick, or would you go and make a deal?
Well, that's exactly it, right? I at this point, I think the Senators probably have a problem of quantity versus quality, right? They've got all the prospects in the pipeline coming down, and whether it's next season or 2 years from now, they've got the reinforcements coming from whether it's NCAA or the AHL ranks there. What to me stands out is they're clearly missing that number 1 center. And whether you think that, Jimmy Superstar is going to get slotted in at center at some point in his career is irrelevant there. You need depth at center. And I think they've got some good players at the center ice position. I don't think they have that elite player. That's why Sens fans seem to work themselves up into a frenzy anytime they hear someone like a Pierre-Luc Dubois or something like that on the trading block. That's what's really been missing from that top line, not just this season, but for a couple of years now, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that that's what the missing ingredient is at this point, is that, number 1 bona fide center? Is what they already have in the system going to be enough to get them over that hump and make them a playoff team? Or do they still need to go out and make, 1 or 2 splashy moves to get there?
Yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Stutzla and Norris, they look like they might be okay, but it's hard to know. I'm not sure if Norris, what he'll be yet. I like what I see so far. Stutzla looks like he's got all the skill in the world. Is he going to be robust enough to be your number 1 center? Certainly looks good so far, but you can't make any official determinations on them just yet. I think if I was to draw up the 2 areas I'm concerned about, it would be that they have, well, goaltending for one. I'm not sure right now what Matt Murray is on any given night. He's either been fantastic or terrible. So you've got to have consistency there. I don't know that they've got their Stanley Cup solution in goal right now. But the biggest thing would be on defense, in that not only do they not have enough talent on defense, I said at the start of the year, and I'll stick with it, they got a number 1 defenseman. I don't know if he's a high-end number 1 defenseman in the league, but he's definitely a number 1 defenseman here. And what he becomes, he's still got to improve. In Thomas Chabot, defensively, he's got to keep improving. But you've got him, and then you've got a bunch of 5-6 defensemen. You got to start plucking. You got to get some guys in there that play the game with some balance as well. Because Thomas Chabot, it feels like they've got not only an absence of top 4 defensemen, but a lot of Thomas Chabot wannabes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see some guys. That's why Jake Sanderson is going to be so crucial. Jacob Bernard Docker, so crucial that those guys become the defensemen that the organization thinks they can, which is why they invested 1st-round draft picks on both. If they can provide that level of balance, then that's going to change everything. Unfortunately, that's still a couple of years away because obviously they're both still in college. But defense, that's where you've got to see some real big changes. If I was going to make one thing different on this team, it would be an improvement at their personnel level in defense.
Yeah. And you just mentioned it right there. And both factors kind of play off one another as well, too, right? You've got Murray doing his best Jekyll and Hyde impersonation, where you really don't know what you're going to get on any given night. Do you think that inconsistency is more so attributed to, him needing to be more consistent and fine tune his game? Or is the inconsistency just a product of having, on any given night, two, maybe even three, not really NHL caliber defensemen out on the ice in front of him, and he's being faced with all of these otherworldly scoring opportunities on every single night out?
Yeah, it's chicken or the egg, right? Which is coming first there? Because I mean, I think that both of them are making life difficult for each other right now.
Hmm.
I think right now, if I'm to just assess Matt Murray, am I concerned about him? Because you're quite right. You take whoever you think is the best goalie in the NHL right now, and you stick him on the Ottawa Senators, you're probably looking at a goaltender that you're not that impressed with. But I'm looking at Matt Murray as a guy. So, okay, why did Tristan Jarry take his job last year?
Hmm.
And when I see him come in here and I see how frequently he struggles with long shots, either whiffing on them completely or leaving big rebounds, that's a red flag for me. Um, but I can't say. I mean, we're 20 games in, and I can't say for sure that this isn't something we can't just write off to the long layoff and what's going on in front of him. Like, how settled are you as a goaltender if you have no faith in the defense that's in front of you? So it's hard to know whether it's the defense, whether it's the goaltending. So your question's a good one. I wish I knew for sure, but I think we'll know when you get a longer, bigger sample size. By the end of the year, we'll have a pretty good idea of what exactly is going on in that dynamic.
Yeah. We've skirted around sort of the trade deadline and, shipping out veteran players and all of that as well so far. And anytime a big name comes up, we see the Sens fans, almost get themselves into a frenzy here, right? We saw it with Pierre-Luc Dubois. We see it now online with the Jack Eichel rumors that he's not so happy in Buffalo. To a lesser degree, you're now starting to see a little bit of smoke coming out of Calgary, where there's rumors there's going to be a shakeup, and all the Sens fans are now thinking, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to have both the Tkachuk brothers here in Ottawa?" But at the same time, anytime, whether it's TSN 1200 or your group or anyone else's podcast that puts it out there, all of these mock trades that some of the fans are putting out there, like, they're not quite grasping that Logan Brown plus a second round pick is not going to be enough to get it done and bring in players of the ilk of an Eichel or a Tkachuk or Pierre-Luc Dubois there. So if you're Pierre Dorian heading into this trade deadline, are you just sort of standing pat with what you've got and you move the veteran players for whatever mid-round picks or whatever you can sort of get for them? Or are you really trying to get a home run swing this year so that you're in a position for success next time around?
Yeah, I mean, the ideal thing would be your home run type of a deal, but to get a guy that moves the needle, that helps you actually move toward a Stanley Cup, that helps your young guys develop, to get those types of players by way of a trade, you have to give up a lot for starters, and you also have to have an owner who's willing to cut the check for that guy's salary.
Mhm.
And I don't think the Sens have that. I don't think there's a big appetite for that, unless it's a scenario where you've got a guy that's getting, still effective, big cap hit, but maybe not much salary owed or something like that. Might be that kind of deal. But in terms of a guy that's helping you with a Stanley Cup picture, this is a discount franchise as far as the way they spend on payroll. And I don't think there's a savior coming in that Pierre Dorian can go out and easily get without giving up too much of the future, or a guy that would be, really effective in every way you want in a rebuild. I just don't think that's doable. I think the fans of this organization have to hang their hat on building through the draft, developing their own, and hoping that all the right moves are made. And there's a number of guys in the organization. It's a slow process, but there are a number of guys in the organization that hopefully sooner rather than later will be really effective, if not starring in the NHL type guys.
Mhm. Is there any names that have sort of piqued your interest as a realistic sort of trade partner with Ottawa? Again, might not be that top end player, but maybe it is someone who just needs that change of scenery, isn't going to be a first line center, but maybe could fit in on maybe a second line role, third line role, something like that. Anyone you see maybe Dorian inquiring about in the upcoming weeks?
Oh boy, it's always one of those things where I could throw a bunch of names at you, but what do they want for them?
Hmm.
If they're of value to me as Pierre Dorion, then there's certainly a value to the opposing GM who's going to give him up. So it's always hard to start throwing some names out. I'm interested in all the usual suspects around the league that are fantastic hockey players. You always listen, but the question becomes, okay, what do you want for them? If you're going to ask me to give up a good chunk of this rebuild, because I can only, if I'm Eugene Melnick and the spending habits I have, I'm only going to be able to do that maybe one time and be able to sleep at night. So I'll bring in that one key guy. Is one key guy going to make a difference for this team? Or is it a case of build through the draft, get a number of guys through the system, and hopefully they all arrive in this magical, 4 or 5 year window, unparalleled success? I think it's a sound system based on the fact that the owner does not want to spend. So I can't really give you a bunch of names unless I know exactly, because again, we all know the guys around the league that we're excited about, but what do I have to give up for them? That's the biggest question. And that would immediately cool my interest if you're asking me to give up all these assets that I've just put together as a team that's trying to build through the draft. And now you want me to take 2 or 3 pillars and give it all the way to this team because I like this one player. It just, there's a way of doing things. You can be successful doing it the way the Sens are doing it, but going out and suddenly now, after 3 years of just absolutely really bad hockey and being near the bottom of the standings, and will be again this year, just to throw that all away right now, I think is a bad idea.
Yeah. How much of that do you think is factored around Melnick's spending habits versus him maybe being a little bit gun shy, having tried to already make that trade in the past with, a Matt Duchene, and he's now seeing, Bo Byram and some of Shane Bowers and all of that in Colorado and going, well, once burned, twice scared, or however that old saying goes there. Is it the money thing, or is it more so, maybe not a great track record as far as making those big swing trades?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think you go back to Bobby Ryan, the whole Daniel Alfredson thing went down. He tried to be frugal with Alfie of all people. And Alfie said, okay, well, bye. If you're going to treat me like that at the end of my career, bye. And then they panicked and went out and made a Bobby Ryan trade and signed him immediately. And maybe it was the following year they signed him, but that was a contract that was a mistake. So yeah, there have been some mistakes, and there's also part of Eugene Melnick right now that's going, he's feeling vindicated, I think, in a lot of cases, validated for not wanting to sign his guys to 8-year contracts, with the exception of Mark Stone, like the guys you mentioned, Duchene. You could look at Kyle Turris, Eric Carlson. These are all exhibits A, B, and C that Eugene Melnick is right to, in most cases, to not sign these long-term contracts. So yeah, I think it's both things are at play: the cash factor and the some of these trades that have fully blown up in their face.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we're almost halfway through the season here, so lots of hockey still to play. For those that want to tune in and check out what you're doing or connect with you online on social media or any of that, where are the best places to find you these days, Steve?
Well, I'll give you the websites for the 2 main sports websites that I do, particularly for fans in Ottawa. It would be the Sens Nation podcast. You can go to sensnationhockey.com for that one. And I know you're chipping in a little bit on that website as well. Thank you for that. It's fantastic. And also, we do a daily one every single weekday. We do a sports and whatever podcast. It's kind of how we bill it. Jim Jerome, my old TSN 1200 morning show partner, and I got back together to talk just about sports and any bit of levity that comes across our desks. And so we're having a lot of fun with that on an every weekday basis. So lots of work, but lots of fun as well. That one's at stevewproject.com.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully tomorrow night's Sens game is as exciting as the last one there.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I'll take another overtime win. It was nice to see some 3-on-3 hockey. So yeah, hopefully they're moving in the right direction, and maybe in a couple of months, we're having a different kind of conversation.